Okay, in this video we want to talk about the limitation of an 8-bit byte. So you recall that this is RAM, let's say right here, right, main memory. And if I take a look at 1 byte here in main memory and I bring it down here, this byte is made up of 8 bits or 8 wires. Now, what is the limitation of a byte that has 8 wires? There's only 256 different ways to configure that. So what does that really mean? Okay, do you recall when I said byte X? Okay, I said that it was a whole number and it had a range from -128 through 0 to 127. Well, take a close look at this right here. I need 256 different ways to manipulate a byte to store those characters. That's 256 different numbers here, starting -128 to 0 to 127. That's 256 different ways. How does that work? Let's think about this. If you had 1 wire here, that could be on or off. I could configure that 1 wire 2 ways. If you had 2 wires, that can be off, off, on, off, and off, on. 4 different ways to configure 2 wires. If you had 3 wires, you could configure it 8 ways. If you had 4 wires, you could configure it 16 ways. 5 wires, you could configure it 32 ways. 6 wires, you can configure it 64 ways. 7 wires, you can configure it 128 ways. And 8 wires, you could actually configure it 256 different ways. So you are limited to 256 different ways to configure that, which, by the way, if you had a variable of type char, remember char letter? I told you that this variable letter could hold every character on your keyboard. That's true, but I guarantee you there's not more than 256 different characters on the keyboard. So that's why we're limited, even with ASCII, to only store letters of the English language. So the bottom line here is that we are limited with a byte, and the byte can only store 256 different configurations. And so if we need to have data bigger than, say, 127 or -128 smaller than that, we need to use a different data type. And in fact, if we need to store characters of alphabets other than the English alphabet, we need to have a different solution. So there is a limitation to an 8-bit byte.